Welcome back. You're with Newsday. More now on the developing COVID situation in Sydney. Joining us live is the New South Wales Labor leader, Chris Minns. Appreciate your time, Chris. Firstly, on the handling of Sydney's latest COVID outbreak, are you comfortable with the approach that the Premier has taken today?
We are. There are new restrictions in New South Wales and in particular in Sydney, but 10 locally acquired cases over the last 24 hours. And we're expecting perhaps more than 13 for the next 24 hours. It's a serious situation in Sydney and the opposition's offering bipartisan support. We need to get through this, but the best way to do that is together.
So you think this is a proportionate response? You don't think that a call for a lockdown to be implemented is the right way to go yet?
No, we think the judgment's right. I think the judgment's right from the Premier. She's obviously done that in concert with the Chief Health Officer, Kerry Chant, and the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard. They've got a good record, to be honest with you, about responding to the COVID pandemic, and the New South Wales opposition offers them bipartisan support. We want this disease dealt with. We don't want politics injected to it. I think that this is a proportionate response given the level of threat, and I know that they'll change their advice if new information is presented to them.
Bipartisanship is a nice idea, but pandemic politics is the reality that we've seen unfold in most states and territories around the country. We have seen Labor leaders in states like WA, Victoria, Queensland take a different approach. Those states seem to be faster to implement lockdowns and slam borders shut. If you were Premier, would you continue with the approach the New South Wales Government is taking, or are you likely to be more cautious like your Labor colleagues in other states?
Well, look, I mean, I've had briefings from Kerry Chant and the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard. I'm not saying this lightly. I'm saying this after having discussions with them that that they've adopted the appropriate course given the threat. These are finely balanced decisions, but they do have over 12 months of experience in battling this. I understand that this new Delta variant is very contagious and very serious threat to the people of Sydney, but I'm comfortable with the government's approach. And again, we are offering bipartisanship. I don't think there should be politics in a pandemic. I've got kids that I'd rather see at school and not on Zoom, and obviously I've got elderly relatives that we don't want infected with this disease. And I think it's important that the people of New South Wales know that there is bipartisanship and we are all invested in getting through this in the shortest space possible.
What's your take on the driver at the centre of all of this? He was unvaccinated, as we know. Is that good enough? Surely it's a failing.
Well, look, I mean, again, I've spoken to the Health Minister and the Chief Health Officer about that. I understand that changes have been made in relation to the transportation of, in particular, airline crew to and from places of accommodation. It's a finely balanced thing, but given the complexity of the COVID response, we're not in a position, and I'm not going to slam the Premier or the Health Minister. Generally speaking, it has been an exemplary response to the COVID pandemic. We want to get through this, particularly over the next 24 hours. Now, actually, that does mean, of course, we will ask questions if we believe that's appropriate in the days and weeks to come. But right now, when Sydney-siders are being told they can't have more than 5 people in their homes, when restrictions are in place, I think it's important that the people of New South Wales know that there is bipartisanship on this, and we do agree with the government's approach and response.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do understand that restrictions do need to be put in place when we see this sort of outbreak develop as it is, but the timing's pretty rough, isn't it? With school holidays coming up, a lot of people planning to travel. There's going to be a lot of pain for a lot of businesses and families in the next few weeks.
There is, and that's why it's a proportionate response from the New South Wales Government. And look, you know, I've got kids of my own and we are heading into the school holiday period. But as the Premier pointed out, if these restrictions are not put in place now, far more draconian and restrictive measures would be required if a mass outbreak happened right throughout Sydney or even beyond Sydney. So as difficult as the coming days will be for millions of people that live in this city, I think it's an appropriate and proportionate response, because the alternative, far harsher restrictions, is not something anyone wants to face.
Okay, well, it certainly sounds like you're on the same ticket as the New South Wales Government on that issue. I do want to turn to the New South Wales budget. There were a lot of sweeteners for New South Wales residents, plenty of measures aiming to ease the cost of living. Considering the times, it's hard to argue against that as well, isn't it? Hard to argue against a cash splash for families and schools at this sort of timing.
Well, look, I mean, on the budget, I do have to draw a line in the sand. At the end of the day, tolls are up, taxes are up, charges are up. fines are up, and really this budget is built on the back of the working families of New South Wales, and I'm not putting too fine a point on it. They're collecting something in the vicinity of $4.5 billion extra in stamp duty over a 2-year period. Fines over the forward estimates will be $3.5 billion, including a 36% increase in just 1 year. So the budget figures and the budget result are built on the back of working families, and there's virtually nothing, just a paltry amount going back into their pockets. They're the ones who are being sent the COVID bill, Ashley.
And what is Labor's policy when it comes to those fines that you just mentioned? Are you committing to put speed warning signs back up? Is that on your agenda? Can you promise New South Wales residents that you'd be a less fining government if you got there?
A less fining government? Well, look, we believe that high visibility policing and putting back warning signs right across the road network is the appropriate thing to do. I am simply not convinced that someone receiving a fine in the mailbox 2 weeks after the offence has been committed is a way of reducing the road toll. And I'll give you some statistics. 12 months ago, the New South Wales Government was fining about 1,500 people a month. Currently, it's 27,000 people a month, and they're about to triple the number of speed cameras right across the New South Wales network. So you could be at about 50 or 60,000 people being fined a month. Most of those fines are 10 kilometres or below in terms of the range of offence, and this is having a huge impact. Now, I'd rather people not commit the offence in the first place, put the warning signs up, get more highway patrol on the streets. Let's return to high visibility policing. That's the most appropriate response.